Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. There's something quietly reassuring about knowing that not everything in the world requires your attention to function properly. Some systems are always on, always steady, always reliable. They don't ask for input. They don't need reminders. They simply continue. Tonight, we'll sit with one of those systems. It doesn't have a switch. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. And it doesn't make itself obvious. The subconscious doesn't appear suddenly. It's not an event. It's a presence. It's the layer beneath everything else. The soft rhythm behind thought. The current that flows whether you look at it or not. You don't have to feel it for it to exist. In fact, its quietness is part of what makes it work so well. Beneath the surface of your waking awareness, the subconscious is already active. It has always been. It regulates, filters, predicts, maintains, and adjusts. It guides the body and supports the mind. It makes choices without pausing. It balances without asking. And it rests without ever being truly at rest. There is no pressure here, no fixing, no unlocking. This isn't a story about doing more. It's a description of what is already being done without effort, without any conscious interference at all. And that is something worth noticing. Even now, as your eyes soften and the sounds of the day begin to drift into the background, the subconscious continues without pause. Your breath keeps its pace. Your muscles release one by one. But deeper still, underneath posture and breath and memory, other systems continue in silence. You may not notice them. That's expected. They were never designed to make themselves known. Thoughts arrive, not because you call them, but because your brain is quietly completing a pattern. A tiny thread is picked up, examined, compared, and then sent forward. Not through effort, but through design. This is the work of something built for continuity, built for calm, and built for you. There's no ceremony to this. No need to invite anything in or activate any hidden potential. The subconscious doesn't wait for you to become ready. It's already running, handling what it always handles: attention, emotion, habit, and care. And so, tonight, we'll let that quiet system take its place in the light, not to examine it under pressure, but to sit beside it in calm. There's a kind of steadiness that comes from recognizing what has always been working behind the scenes. The stability that doesn't need confirmation. The motion that doesn't need sensation. The subconscious doesn't need you to do anything. It simply needs space. And you already have that. Let this be a gentle descent into a quieter layer of experience. Not deep like a cave, not hidden like a secret. Just slower, softer, further from the surface and closer to the rhythm that doesn't ask for attention. The one that continues even when the rest of the world falls away. You're not arriving anywhere. You've already been here. All that's happening now is noticing. And I'm glad you're here. Beneath the surface of awareness, the brain is constantly sorting through an extraordinary amount of information, far more than we ever consciously receive. In every moment, signals arrive from the body and the world outside. Sounds, temperatures, movements, changes in light, shifts in pressure, and even subtle internal sensations all stream toward the brain at once. But you do not experience them all, and you were never meant to. One of the quiet miracles of the subconscious is its ability to decide what enters awareness and what does not. This is not a conscious choice. It is not a skill to be practiced. It is a built-in feature of the brain's perceptual systems, refined over time to preserve stability and prevent overwhelm. At the heart of this process is filtering. Imagine the constant hum of a refrigerator, the soft sensation of your clothing against your skin, or the faint presence of distant traffic. Most of these sensations are detected by the body, but never passed on to your awareness. Not because they're unimportant, but because they're steady, familiar, unchanging. And the subconscious knows that unless a signal shifts, it doesn't need to take up conscious space. The brain's filtering systems reduce sensory input by orders of magnitude before anything reaches the surface. Of all the stimuli that touch the body, light on the skin, shifts in ambient temperature, faint background noise, only a fraction are selected for awareness. This is done through a combination of neural gating mechanisms and predictive processing. In simple terms, the brain predicts what it expects to sense and tunes out the rest unless something unexpected occurs. This is part of why silence can feel louder than sound, or why a familiar environment can seem to fade into the background. The subconscious is constantly monitoring for change, not constancy, and that helps you stay oriented. It means your attention is directed only toward what might need it, never flooded by what does not. In many ways, the subconscious behaves like a watchful attendant in a quiet room, not interrupting unless something requires response, not bothering you with repetition, not insisting on being noticed. It steps forward only when needed, and even then, often so subtly that you do not realize it. This is how a creaking floorboard cuts through a quiet evening, how a flicker of motion catches your eye even when you're not looking directly at it, or how the sound of your own name, softly spoken, can rise to attention even in a crowded space. These are examples of salience detection, a system in the brain that continuously evaluates which signals are important enough to pass forward. But these moments are rare, and the rest of the time, your sensory world is being softened, quieted, filtered, and prioritized for you, without your permission, without your awareness. There is no need to tune yourself. You are already being tuned. The filtering begins at the sensory organs themselves. Tiny cells in the ear, eye, and skin that adapt quickly to steady inputs. If a light remains constant, your visual system gradually reduces its signal. If a touch persists, your receptors quiet down. This early stage adaptation ensures that only changes get passed on. Then the signals move upward to the brainstem and beyond, where further sorting occurs. The thalamus, often described as the brain's sensory gatekeeper, directs traffic, deciding which signals move forward and which are left to fade. But even the thalamus does not decide alone. The cortex, brainstem, and limbic system all contribute to a layered process of priority and calm. And so, most of what reaches you has already passed through multiple layers of invisible decision. You experience the outcome, but not the sorting itself. This is why you do not feel every heartbeat, why you don't notice the full weight of your body all the time, why a breeze that once felt cool now goes unnoticed. It's not because those sensations disappeared, It's because the subconscious determined they no longer needed your attention. This is not suppression. It is protection, a form of gentle care, a way of keeping your mind free to drift and wander without being pulled in every direction. And it's working, even now. The quiet filtering continues as you listen, letting the steady remain steady, letting the soft remain soft, and letting the important things rise only when needed. Even when the surface feels quiet, the deeper systems of the brain continue their quiet work. Just as the subconscious filters sound and light, it also manages something less visible: your emotional state. This too happens without needing your involvement. In the same way your body adjusts temperature and posture without consulting you, it also regulates emotional tone, gently shifting your inner balance, making small corrections, easing tension, and creating the possibility of calm without demanding it. This work begins in the autonomic nervous system. As its name suggests, it operates automatically. The sympathetic branch rises to meet challenge and change. The parasympathetic branch brings restoration. Both are always present, always shifting in subtle patterns, responding to what the subconscious detects, not just in the world around you, but in the world within you. Even now, your heart rate is being adjusted by invisible signals from your brainstem. Tiny shifts in breath depth and muscle tone are guided by subconscious appraisal of safety and need. If your surroundings are stable, your internal settings begin to reflect that. Not because you tried, not because you noticed, but because the system responds to patterns. Steadiness begets steadiness. A network known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, helps modulate stress response. When something uncertain or demanding arises, this system releases hormones like cortisol to support action. But the release is not permanent. Once the challenge passes, or once the subconscious determines the moment no longer requires vigilance, this same axis signals the body to return to balance. Cortisol production slows, heart rate decreases, breath deepens again, all without your intervention. The ability to return to calm is not a skill you need to learn. It's a process the brain already knows. One part of the brain, the amygdala, is often associated with emotional reaction, particularly fear and urgency. But it doesn't work alone. The prefrontal cortex, insula, anterior cingulate, and other regions communicate constantly with it, even during rest. They provide ongoing updates, contextual information, safety cues, quiet confirmations that nothing needs to change. These are not messages you receive consciously. They are internal signals passed back and forth in silence. Sometimes you may feel tension rise, seemingly without cause. A heartbeat that feels slightly stronger. A breath that shortens for a moment. But just as often, these moments resolve on their own. The same system that initiated the response also governs its end. The background regulators notice the return of safety, and they release their hold. Muscles ease, temperature adjusts, and the moment passes without explanation. This is what makes the subconscious so trustworthy. It does not only initiate, it also resolves. There is no need to direct these processes, no pressure to manage them. They are already managing themselves. Even your emotional memory, the way you associate feeling with past experience, is being quietly restructured each night. During REM sleep, The brain replays emotional experiences from the day and reshapes how they are stored. This is not done for dramatic purposes. It is done for stability, to make meaning more manageable, to allow experiences to remain, but with softer edges. And all of this happens whether or not you are paying attention. If you've ever found yourself feeling better without knowing why, less anxious, less heavy, more even, that was not a mistake. That was subconscious regulation doing its work. Just as your ears adjust to silence and your eyes adapt to darkness, your emotional systems adapt to the tone of your environment. And when the environment is quiet, the brain gradually returns to calm. The effect is not always immediate, but it is consistent. The longer the world remains stable, the more the subconscious reduces internal alert signals. The more neutral the input, the less reason the system has to remain elevated. It's not indifference, it's conservation. It is care, expressed through calibration. And so, even as you rest, the systems that regulate emotion continue. They adjust the levels, ease the strain, conserve energy, prepare the body not for action, but for recovery, for peace, for continuity. You are not required to do anything. The conditions for calm are already being met. All that remains is time, and the slow settling that happens when effort disappears. The subconscious has seen this state before. It recognizes it, and it continues its quiet work without needing to be asked. Some actions feel like decisions. Others simply unfold. You find yourself standing, moving, reaching, completing tasks before a conscious thought has even formed. This is not forgetfulness. It is not a lack of awareness. It is the natural result of a brain that understands repetition. The subconscious does not only regulate emotions or filter sensation, it also handles the patterns of your day, the ones you've built through time, repetition, and consistency. These patterns, known as habits, run beneath awareness. Once they've been learned, the brain stores them in a place that no longer needs daily effort, and that is a gift. The regions involved in this quiet automation include the basal ganglia, a set of deep brain structures responsible for movement, routine, and habit formation. Once a behavior is repeated often enough, the basal ganglia begin to encode it. Eventually, it no longer requires the involvement of the higher decision-making centers. It becomes automatic. The muscles move before the thought completes. You may not remember each step you take to prepare for sleep. You may not recall the exact moment your toothbrush is lifted, the water turned off, the lights dimmed. But your body knows. The pattern has been stored, and the subconscious retrieves it with precision. This frees your conscious attention. By placing repeated behaviors into subconscious systems, the brain conserves energy. It doesn't ask you to decide over and over again. It simply continues what has already been learned. This is how you can drive a familiar road and arrive without recalling the details. It's how you reach for the same cupboard, follow the same path, fold your laundry in the same sequence. These are not mistakes. They are signs of efficiency. Habitual behavior is not mindlessness. It is delegation. And your brain delegates generously. It does this not only with physical movements, but also with internal processes, emotional responses, thought patterns, even posture and breath rhythms. All of these can become familiar enough to settle into subconscious loops. The brain doesn't repeat them because they're correct. It repeats them because they are known. And in the language of the subconscious, familiarity is efficiency. This is part of why change can feel slow. New behaviors must be processed in higher regions of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and associated areas. They require attention, correction, monitoring. But once those behaviors become familiar, the workload is transferred. The subconscious receives the pattern, stores it, and begins to run it automatically. There's comfort in that. It means you are not rebuilding your world each morning. You are stepping into it with continuity. And the continuity runs deep. Each day, your brain cues certain patterns without you noticing. You wake at roughly the same time, follow the same physical sequence, return to the same thoughts. The cues may be environmental, emotional, or temporal. A certain quality of light, a specific sound, a mood that returns with the hour. And with each cue, the subconscious selects the next behavior and begins the process before you've asked it to. Even rest itself can become habitual. The posture your body prefers, the pillow you reach for, the pace at which your breath slows. All of these can become ingrained, so that calm arrives not through effort, but through the quiet familiarity of the steps that came before. There is no need to guide these systems. They are already responding to patterns. Your role is not to correct them, but to allow them. And when you do, a kind of internal stillness becomes possible. The subconscious thrives on repetition. Not because it lacks imagination, but because repetition reduces uncertainty. It lets the body move through space and time without questioning each motion, without examining each step. That lack of questioning is not ignorance. It is trust. And the body trusts what is known. So tonight, as your muscles begin to ease into familiar rest, the brain is already retrieving the patterns that have led to sleep before, not as commands, but as quiet instructions folded into experience. The lights lower, the breath deepens, and the subconscious cues the next signal, then the next, then the next. This is not automation in a mechanical sense. It is familiarity guiding physiology. And your brain has been practicing it for longer than you can remember. Each time you repeat something in safety, the subconscious listens, and it prepares to carry that pattern for you tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You do not need to hold the pattern. It's already being held. There is a common belief that remembering takes effort, that to store something, you must try to hold it, that to retain it, you must repeat it. But the truth is softer than that. Much of what becomes memory is formed not through trying, but through resting. The subconscious is constantly observing, organizing, and shaping your experiences into something stable. This happens while you're awake, and it continues long after you've fallen asleep. You are not the one doing it. The process is quiet, continuous, and self-guided. It begins the moment something meaningful happens and continues whether or not you're paying attention. Memory formation begins with encoding. The brain receives a signal and decides, almost instantly, whether to keep it. That decision is based not on importance, but on pattern, on novelty, on emotional tone. These signals are passed to the hippocampus, a region near the center of the brain that acts as a temporary holding space. Like a gentle librarian, the hippocampus sets the new memory aside for later. And then the subconscious begins to determine where it might belong. But you don't feel this sorting. It doesn't rise to awareness. The conversation between brain regions happens without words, without attention, without sensation. This is why memories often arrive days later, clearer than they were at the time. It's why understanding deepens without deliberate effort. The brain has been continuing its work all along, deciding what to keep, what to link, what to set aside. Much of this happens during rest. When you sleep, the brain becomes more active in certain regions, not less. In deep sleep, the hippocampus replays patterns from the day. These patterns are sent out across the cortex, where they are gently integrated into long-term networks. This process is called memory consolidation. It is not something you need to practice. It is something your brain already knows how to do. And it does it best when you are no longer trying. During non-REM sleep, electrical patterns ripple through the brain in slow, synchronized waves. These waves are associated with the strengthening of declarative memories, facts, information, personal experiences. The kind of memories that give shape to who you are and what you've lived through. During REM sleep, a different process unfolds. Emotional memories are reviewed and softened. The intensity of a feeling may be reduced. The sharpness of an image may become gentler, but the meaning remains. This allows you to carry experience without being burdened by it. And you do not need to supervise any of this, even if your sleep feels broken or incomplete. Even if your days feel scattered, the subconscious still attempts to carry forward what matters. The process is robust, flexible, adaptive. It does not require perfection. This is why you may remember a conversation more clearly after a nap. Why a decision feels simpler in the morning. Why something that felt confusing yesterday begins to make sense today. The subconscious has been shaping your experience, even while your conscious attention moved on. The brain is not simply a recorder. It is a reweaver. It threads together fragments and places them into a larger context. One that matches what you already know, what you already believe, and what helps you continue. These threads are subtle. You may not notice them forming. But later, when a memory resurfaces with unexpected clarity, it is a sign that the subconscious has done its work. This is not the memory of rote learning, not the kind that demands rehearsal. This is the memory of life itself, integrated, linked, and softened with time. Your brain does not ask for permission to do this. It simply begins, and it continues. Sorting, reinforcing, dismissing, linking, until the day's moments become part of something stable. And all of this happens while you rest. There is no need to grasp every detail. No need to worry about what will be kept. The system already knows how to keep what needs keeping. Tonight, as sleep approaches, the quiet work will begin again. The hippocampus will replay. The cortex will listen. And meaning will be reshaped in the background, without pressure or sound. This is not your job. It never was. The memory of today will take its place in the archive of the subconscious. Not because you tried, but because the system works. And it works best when left alone. Not everything you understand comes from thinking. Some things arrive more quietly, without effort, without decision. A face that seems familiar, a sound that feels out of place, a movement that draws your eyes before you know why. These are not guesses. They are signals drawn from patterns your brain has already learned to recognize. And most of this happens without you ever being aware of it. Pattern recognition is one of the subconscious brain's most powerful abilities. It does not rely on logic or explanation. It relies on exposure, on repetition, on the slow gathering of sensory detail until familiarity is formed. And once it is, the system can detect even the smallest change. This begins early in development. From infancy, the brain begins to store associations. Sounds match faces. Tones match moods. Movements predict outcomes. The subconscious collects these relationships without needing direction. It begins to sense structure in experience. And over time, those structures grow more complex. By the time you are an adult, this system is fully active. Not just in vision or sound, but across every sense. You know the rhythm of someone's walk. You recognize a voice from a single word. You can tell when a room feels out of order, not because anything is clearly wrong, but because something has broken the expected shape. These are not thoughts. They are recognitions, immediate, unnamed, fully formed before they ever reach awareness. This is possible because the brain operates as a prediction engine. It doesn't simply wait for input, it anticipates it. Each moment, it prepares for what should come next. This is true in language, where the brain predicts the end of a sentence before it's spoken. It's true in music, where rhythm and melody create expectation. It's true in movement, where the brain forecasts physical outcomes in milliseconds before the body responds. And these forecasts are not conscious. They do not need to be. The system beneath awareness is faster, quieter, and often more accurate when left to its own rhythm. Much of this work takes place in areas like the cerebellum and the temporal lobes. These regions detect regularity and timing. They learn the structure of input and begin to anticipate it. Even the act of reading relies on this process. Your eyes skip ahead slightly, guided by subconscious prediction of which words are likely to follow. You do not realize this is happening. You simply continue reading. There is efficiency in this. The subconscious allows your attention to stay fluid. Instead of stopping to assess every moment, it provides a constant undercurrent of expectation. And when something doesn't match, it brings that information forward, quietly but distinctly. This is why a single discordant note in a song can catch your attention. Why a missing item in a familiar space feels obvious, even if you can't name what's gone. The subconscious is always comparing what is to what should be. And when there's a difference, it lets you know. Importantly, this is not limited to the senses. Emotional and social patterns are included too. The brain recognizes the patterns of conversation, the arc of interaction, the cadence of stories. These templates form over time and are used by the subconscious to navigate without constant analysis. You know when a sentence is meant to be comforting, when a silence is too long, when someone is about to speak, even before they do. These are not guesses, they are recognitions. All of this reduces the need for decision. It lowers the burden on conscious attention and lets the subconscious carry more of the weight. And that's the point. Not to make you better, but to let you do less. Pattern recognition is not about performance. It's about stability. The brain uses patterns to move through the world without having to question everything. The more familiar something becomes, the less conscious energy it demands. And in that quietness, there is freedom. Tonight, even as you listen, this system is active. The cadence of words, the rhythm of breath, the pauses between thoughts. Your subconscious is noticing them all. And as long as they remain steady, your attention is free to drift. There is no need to check. The patterns will hold. And if something changes, the subconscious will respond before you even know why. This is the comfort of delegation, the quiet work of recognition. And it continues even now as thought fades and pattern remains. The brain is not a passive receiver of the world. It does not wait in silence for input to arrive, then decide how to respond. It is constantly predicting, forecasting what will happen next, preparing responses before signals are even complete, and most of that happens without you knowing. This is called predictive processing, a way of understanding the brain not as a mirror, but as a model builder. Your brain carries a quiet expectation of what is likely to happen, and it uses that expectation to shape what you perceive, not as fantasy, but as a kind of perceptual shorthand. At every moment, the brain generates internal models based on prior experience. These models anticipate what sensory input should look like, sound like, feel like. When new information enters, it is compared not to a blank slate, but to the model already in place. If the incoming signal matches the expectation, the brain saves time and energy. It processes the experience more efficiently, passing it through without interruption. But if there is a mismatch, if something deviates, the subconscious alerts other systems. Not urgently, but consistently. A signal is raised. Awareness may follow. This process begins before awareness is even involved. It is active in the earliest layers of sensation. In the retina of the eye, certain neurons respond less to familiar shapes and more to the unexpected. In the auditory system, sounds that repeat become less noticeable over time, until a new tone breaks the pattern. The brain is not simply reacting. It is predicting and using those predictions to focus attention only where needed. The result is a kind of perceptual compression. Most of what you experience is already partially resolved before it reaches your conscious awareness. You see what you expect to see, hear what you expect to hear, and only when something breaks the pattern does the full weight of attention turn toward it. This is not a flaw, it is a feature. Because of this quiet forecasting, the world feels smoother, more continuous, more stable than it truly is. You don't notice every flicker of light, every variation in sound, every change in pressure. Your brain smooths over the noise and highlights what's relevant. And all of this happens while you remain unaware of the prediction itself. The motor system also uses this strategy. When you reach for a cup or take a step, the brain predicts the outcome of the movement before it completes it. This is why actions feel fluid. The movement you perceive is not a chain of calculations. It is a prediction unfolding. When that prediction is correct, the motion is smooth. When it is off, you stumble or miss. And even then, the subconscious corrects before conscious thought can catch up. It is not just perception and movement. Emotions follow predictive rhythms too. If you are used to a certain interaction pattern, kindness, conflict, repetition, your subconscious begins to forecast the emotional tone of new interactions before they fully unfold. This is not judgment. It is simply pattern recognition applied to social expectation. The subconscious prepares the emotional state it anticipates needing, often before words are even spoken. These emotional forecasts can be revised, but the default is already active, quietly shaping tone, breath, posture, and thought before you realize it. And so, in every system, vision, hearing, motion, emotion, the subconscious is always slightly ahead of the moment. It listens for deviation. It holds a model of what is likely to happen. And when that model holds true, calm persists. This is why so many moments feel uneventful, why stillness is possible. Because nothing interrupted the expectation. The model was confirmed, and the subconscious let the moment pass without escalation. Even now, this process is at work. Your auditory system predicts the rhythm of this voice, the pace of each sentence, the rise and fall of tone. Your brain is already forecasting the likely continuation, and as long as that forecast holds, the signal feels smooth, effortless, unbroken. There is no need to maintain attention. The prediction does it for you. If a sentence ends as expected, the subconscious rewards itself with silence. No alarm, no change in direction, just the continuation of what was already working. This is the architecture of ease, and it runs everywhere. As you rest, the predictive systems of the brain continue, quietly testing, quietly confirming, letting experience unfold only when it's needed. There is no need to plan. The planning is already in motion. You are not catching up to the world. You are being carried gently just ahead of it. And your brain already knows the way. The human brain is vast. It holds more connections than there are stars in the galaxy. It processes billions of signals every second. And yet, your conscious attention can only hold a few of those signals at once. This limitation isn't a flaw. It's not something to overcome. It is a structural part of how the brain protects you from overwhelm, from distraction, from unnecessary noise. Attention is a bottleneck. Narrow, selective, necessary. At any given moment, your conscious awareness is tuned to a very small fraction of what's happening. You may feel the temperature of the air, hear the sound of this voice, sense the weight of your body, but you do not feel your liver regulating blood sugar. You are not aware of each breath's exact chemistry. You do not track the electrical rhythm of your heart in real time. You don't need to. The subconscious is doing that for you. It's not that those signals are absent. They are simply not permitted through the bottleneck. The thalamus plays a major role in this selection process. Acting like a switchboard, it filters sensory input and determines which signals get passed to the cortex, the seat of conscious awareness. But even the cortex does not take in everything it's offered. Higher areas continue the filtration. They compare the signal to past experiences, current goals, environmental stability. If a signal passes all these layers, it may briefly rise into consciousness, and then, just as quickly, it may fade. In most cases, attention is drawn to change, to contrast, to novelty. These are the signals that get through. A sudden light in a dark room, a sharp sound in a quiet space, a new word in a familiar sentence. These contrasts activate attentional networks, alerting the conscious mind that something unexpected has occurred. But the rest of the signals, the ones that match the prediction, that remain steady, that cause no conflict, they stay below the surface, not because they are unimportant, but because the subconscious has already confirmed them as safe. This bottleneck protects you. Without it, the world would be unlivable. Every flicker of light, every heartbeat, every internal shift, every microscopic change would demand conscious response. You would be flooded, constantly pulled away from rest, unable to settle. Instead, the brain selects one stream of experience and lets the rest continue silently. This is why it's possible to fall into a rhythm, to read without noticing time, to listen without remembering each sentence. The subconscious is holding the background steady, gently managing the flood, so that your awareness can rest on a single thread. And even that thread doesn't stay long. Studies show that human attention can reliably hold just 4 to 7 items at once. Not thousands, not hundreds, just a handful of moments, impressions, thoughts. This small window is all that awareness can manage. Everything else is stored, processed, filtered, or discarded by the subconscious without disruption. Even sustained attention, when you feel deeply focused, is maintained by subconscious systems. The reticular activating system in the brainstem helps regulate alertness and engagement, deciding when to tune in and when to tune out. You don't instruct it. You don't control it. It works on its own, quietly guiding your ability to stay with a single experience for more than a few moments at a time. And when it chooses to release you, when attention fades, it is not failure. It is rhythm. The bottleneck allows only so much at once, and then it closes again. This is why rest feels scattered sometimes, why thoughts drift, why focus is so easily lost. It's not a defect in the system. It is the system protecting itself from overload. You are not meant to carry everything. You are meant to carry very little, while the subconscious handles the rest. Even now, as this voice continues, your brain is deciding what to keep, what to ignore, what to revisit later in quiet. The signal passes through the narrow gate of attention, and everything else fades into the background hum, where it will be sorted later. This gate is always open, but only a sliver at a time. And that's more than enough, because the system that protects your attention is older than thought, wiser than worry, and already doing its job. You can let it continue without needing to hold it. The bottleneck remains in place, and the flow stays gentle. There is nothing being missed. There is only what is needed, and everything else continuing in peace. The world is full of signals, far more than you'll ever be aware of. Sounds, lights, textures, movements, internal cues, all arriving at once. But only a few ever make it through the narrow channel of conscious attention. Most fade before they reach awareness. Some arrive gently, Others break through like a bell ringing in quiet air. But none of these moments are random. The subconscious chooses what to notice, not based on logic, not based on effort, but on salience. Salience means significance, not in the sense of importance to your goals or values, but in the sense of difference, change, intensity, relevance to your current state. It's why a flashing light captures your eye more than a steady one. Why a sudden voice pulls your attention even when you weren't listening. The brain doesn't notice everything. It notices what stands out. This begins with the sensory systems themselves. Each one has cells that are more responsive to change than to constancy. The ears register the sudden start of a sound, not its continuation. The eyes detect motion more easily than stillness. Touch becomes most noticeable when something new presses against the skin, not when pressure remains constant. But deeper than that, the brain asks a quiet question. Is this relevant right now? And that relevance can come from many sources. If someone says your name, it rises above the noise. Not because it's loud, but because it's linked to your identity. The brain has tagged it as permanently important, and it filters for it constantly. This is called the cocktail party effect. The ability to hear your name in a crowded room even when you aren't paying attention. A sign that the subconscious is always listening, always scanning. Other triggers are tied to current needs. If you are hungry, the scent of food becomes more noticeable. If you are tired, soft textures draw your focus. The subconscious monitors internal states and primes the senses to highlight what supports those states. You don't have to ask for help. The system is already adjusting the spotlight. Emotions influence this process too. If you feel anxious, the brain is more likely to notice threat cues. A creaking floorboard, a shadow at the edge of your vision. These details may not matter objectively, but they matter to the system trying to protect you. Under stress, the subconscious widens the alert filter. More gets through. More is questioned. The spotlight swings more often, checking corners that would otherwise remain dark. But when you feel calm, the opposite occurs. The spotlight narrows. Fewer signals are deemed relevant. The brain senses safety and begins to conserve energy, allowing only the most meaningful details to rise. The rest dissolve back into the background hum. This filtering happens continuously. The brain never truly stops assessing. Even when you're not paying attention, a network of structures, including the thalamus, amygdala, and brainstem, continues to scan. Not in panic, but in patience. It is waiting to be needed, and until it is, it stays quiet. This is why you don't notice the weight of your hands unless something changes. Why the ticking of a clock fades until the moment it stops. Why your eyes pass over the same spot 100 times before something shifts, and only then do you look again. The signal was always there, but the brain chose when to let you feel it. Attention is not about openness, it's about precision. The subconscious highlights only a few threads and leaves the rest untouched. Not because they don't exist, but because they are being handled. Even now, your subconscious is scanning, checking for sharpness, for novelty, for signals that match the shape of need. But in this moment, there is little for it to find. The input is soft, the rhythm is even. The system registers no shift, and so it stays at rest. And that too is a choice, a quiet confirmation that all is well, that no adjustment is needed, that you are free to remain as you are. Nothing is being missed. What matters will rise when it's time. And until then, the world can continue in silence, with the subconscious watching and deciding, and letting the rest remain beautifully unseen. Not everything the brain notices is brought forward. In fact, most of what it processes remains in the background, silent, steady, unannounced. These are the signals that are stable, predictable, familiar, the ones that do not change and do not ask to be changed. And so, they stay where they are, quiet, ongoing, invisible. This is not neglect, it is intelligence. When something remains constant for long enough, the brain stops highlighting it. That doesn't mean it disappears. It means the subconscious has confirmed its safety, its stability, its place in the pattern, and so it steps back. The signal continues, but the attention moves on. This is why you rarely feel your heartbeat, even though it pulses through your body every moment. It is why the weight of your clothing fades after you get dressed, why the background hum of a refrigerator vanishes into stillness. These things are not gone. They've simply been categorized: safe, steady, no response required. This mechanism allows the brain to conserve energy. Attention is limited. Processing is expensive. So the subconscious runs quiet background checks on everything, internal and external, and promotes only what changes, only what needs you. The rest, it is still being cared for, just not consciously. The digestive system is a good example. It processes every meal with extraordinary complexity. Enzymes released, muscles contracted, nutrients absorbed, waste prepared. All of it coordinated by the enteric nervous system, sometimes called the second brain, operating with near complete independence. And yet, you feel none of it, unless something unusual occurs. The same is true for blood pressure regulation, hormone release, pupil dilation, immune monitoring, and countless other systems, each one handled automatically, moment by moment. Unless something deviates from expectation, the subconscious holds these patterns silently. Even the act of standing upright is managed without awareness. Balance is maintained through tiny corrections across muscles and joints, coordinated by the cerebellum. You don't feel those adjustments, but they're always happening. Dozens per second, quietly refining your position in space. What these examples show is simple. The brain doesn't need your awareness to take care of you. In fact, it does its best work when it doesn't have to announce itself. Familiarity plays a major role here. When something is known, when it has been present long enough without disruption, the brain treats it as neutral. It fades, a clock ticking, the scent of your room, the temperature of the chair you've been sitting in. These inputs are sensed but not felt. Their constancy makes them invisible. This is called habituation, a reduction in response to a repeated stimulus. It is not boredom, it is not failure, it is efficiency. And it happens everywhere, in sound, in touch, in emotion, even in thought. A repetitive worry may feel sharper at first, but over time, if the brain senses no change, it may recede into the background. not solved, but muted, deemed non-urgent. It is not ignoring the signal. It is holding it gently in reserve, waiting for new input before acting. And still, the subconscious watches. This background monitoring is not passive. It's active, sensitive, patient. It checks the familiar for signs of instability, a change in rhythm, a slight acceleration, a drop or rise in intensity. If anything shifts, the brain adjusts. It rechecks the category, reevaluates whether the signal should rise into awareness. Most of the time, it doesn't need to. This is why the feel of your bed is so comforting. The shape of your pillow, the softness of your sheets. These sensations become part of the background. They signal safety, not because they are intense, but because they remain the same. And that constancy becomes calming. The background is not empty. It is full of work being done quietly. And when nothing breaks the pattern, the system rests. Not by stopping, but by continuing without interruption. Even now, this is happening. The sound of this voice, the tone, the rhythm. If it remains gentle and steady, your brain will begin to file it under familiar. The voice doesn't disappear. It simply requires less conscious attention. You hear it, but without effort. And that frees your attention for something else, or for nothing at all. This is the state where rest becomes possible, where the body is monitored. The environment is scanned. The background is held steady, and none of it asks you to do anything. It's all already happening. And that is why you can let go. Because what matters will rise, and what stays in the background is not forgotten. It is being cared for quietly, continuously, and with no need for you to notice at all. There is a quiet belief, often unspoken, that if something matters, you should be able to feel it. That effort should produce sensation. That important processes should make themselves known. But the brain does not follow that rule, and the subconscious never has. Most of what it does, you never feel. And that's exactly how it's meant to be. From the outside, this may seem strange, but from the inside, it's a sign of balance, of systems functioning so smoothly that no interruption is needed. There is no alert, no demand for attention, just the ongoing quiet work of keeping you whole. This is not a trick of perception. It is design. Conscious awareness is narrow, small, protective. It focuses on one thread of experience at a time, while everything else, every automatic system, every familiar process, every background rhythm, continues without pause. This is the hidden majority of your experience, the part that doesn't ask to be seen. The brain handles temperature regulation, blood flow, digestion, immune surveillance, and thousands of tiny muscular adjustments every minute, without ever surfacing them to your awareness. It makes decisions about focus and timing and spatial orientation without needing to ask you first. It stores and retrieves memories. It connects meaning across moments. It maintains emotional tone. And it does all of this without noise. The silence is not absence. It is confidence. If you don't feel something happening, it's often because nothing needs your help. The neural pathways involved in background processing, like the basal ganglia, brainstem, and cerebellum, are highly efficient. They've evolved to manage familiar, high-frequency tasks without conscious review. That's why so much of your day feels seamless. You don't have to think about how to walk or how to speak or how to interpret a smile. These systems have it handled, and when they don't, they let you know. The moment a process begins to drift, when rhythm is lost or balance changes, the subconscious sends a signal. That's when you notice. A misstep, a skipped word, a pause that lasts too long. These are the exceptions that prove the rule. Because when everything is working, you don't notice at all. The prefrontal cortex, the region associated with conscious planning and attention, is not designed to monitor background tasks. It would overload almost immediately. Instead, it's used sparingly, reserved for novelty, for conflict, for decision. The rest is delegated downward and outward to the broader networks that handle things quietly. This allows you to rest. If the conscious mind were responsible for every detail of breathing, posture, balance, digestion, and emotion, there would be no room left for anything else. No conversation, no focus, no sleep. But you don't have to manage those things. They're being managed for you. Even the feeling of doing nothing is layered with hidden activity. When you sit still, the default mode network becomes active, a system involved in self-reflection, future planning, and memory consolidation. You may feel idle, but inside, the subconscious is connecting patterns, softening emotional edges, linking thought to story. And none of it requires your attention. This is one reason silence feels safe. Stillness becomes spacious. Because when nothing is being asked of you, the brain continues on its own. Not slower, just quieter, more rhythmic, more refined. Only novelty rises to awareness. That's why so much of your body disappears from perception once it becomes familiar. The feeling of your feet, the rhythm of your breath, the gentle sound of the room. These sensations remain constant, so they are filtered out. You are free to release them. Not because they're gone, but because your brain has confirmed nothing has changed. And if something does change, it will let you know. You are not missing anything. This is the design of calm. The silence you feel is not emptiness. It is everything being handled without asking for your help. The fewer signals you feel, the better things are working. When processes move without friction, the system stays quiet, and the quiet becomes a kind of reassurance. The subconscious speaks in absence. It communicates through what doesn't happen. And if you hear nothing, if you feel nothing, it usually means everything is exactly as it should be. You are not behind. You are not disconnected. You are not waiting for something to begin. The process is already underway, and it continues smoothly, invisibly, without needing to say a word. There is a kind of work that announces itself. It arrives with movement, with sound, with visible change. You see it unfolding and understand that something is happening. But there is another kind of work, one that does not make itself known. It moves without sound, without signal, without interruption. This is how the subconscious operates. It is not a system that steps forward to explain itself. It does not report its progress or pause for recognition. Instead, it continues. Not sometimes, but always. Not only during moments of stillness, but in the background of every waking and sleeping hour. You may not feel it, and that is part of its purpose. Many of the systems that keep you regulated and responsive exist far below the level of awareness. They are built to function on their own. And because they function well, they rarely draw attention to themselves. This silence is not failure. It is design. The subconscious does not need you to monitor it. It is already monitoring you. Every breath is being adjusted slightly for depth and rhythm. Every beat of the heart is responding to signals you do not perceive. Muscles shift to maintain comfort and circulation. Pupils contract or widen to guide light. And internally, chemical signals guide digestion, immune response, and sleep preparation. You do not have to guide these tasks. They are not waiting on your input. The system is self-sustaining. Some of this work begins before you even realize a need. For example, when you begin to feel tired, the brain has already started adjusting hormone levels. Melatonin begins to rise. Cortisol begins to fall. Blood pressure lowers slightly. These changes are gradual, gentle, but they are already in motion long before you identify the feeling as fatigue. In that way, the subconscious is always ahead of you. It begins preparing for calm while you are still in motion. It creates the conditions for rest before you choose to lie down. You arrive at stillness because the system has been guiding you toward it all along, and it continues once you are there. During sleep, the subconscious does not rest. It transitions. Brain activity slows in some regions and becomes more active in others. The body is scanned and adjusted. Memory is consolidated. Emotion is processed. Immune activity increases. All of this occurs without your knowledge, without your permission, without the need to be witnessed. This is why it can feel like nothing is happening. You lie still. You sense no movement. You think the mind has gone quiet. But inside, the process continues. The subconscious does not speak in words. It does not deliver updates. Its signal is stillness. Its message is silence. This silence is not passive. It is full of activity. The absence of sensation does not mean absence of care. In fact, the quieter things feel, the more you can trust that the system is handling everything it needs to. This is especially true during recovery. When you are sick, the subconscious initiates countless invisible responses. Inflammation is moderated. Fever is managed. Appetite adjusts. Rest becomes more appealing. None of this needs to be explained to you. It simply begins. The body knows what to do, and the mind does not need to oversee it. This is one of the most reliable things about you. You are cared for even in your unawareness. It is normal to feel nothing, normal to be unsure whether anything is happening. The system is designed to fade from view when there is no disruption. That is not a failure of perception. It is a signal that everything is running smoothly. You are not disconnected. You are simply not being alerted. No news, in this case, is good news. Even now, the subconscious continues its quiet work, regulating emotion, scanning for change, maintaining internal rhythms, letting familiar signals remain in the background, while gently watching for the unexpected. There is nothing you need to activate. The process is already in motion. This part of you is not waiting for intervention. It is not sleeping. It is not idle. It is present, uninterrupted, constant. And in that constancy, you are being supported. With every moment that passes, the system continues. Not to be dramatic, not to be recognized, but simply because that is what it does. It works best when left alone. And right now, it is working. Without sound, without instruction. Stillness can feel like absence. Silence can feel like a void. And when nothing calls your attention, it is easy to wonder whether anything is occurring at all. But the absence of sensation is not the absence of activity. The quiet that surrounds you is filled with motion, just not the kind that demands your awareness. The subconscious does not create obvious signals. It does not need to. Its job is not to announce its presence. Its job is to maintain your internal world with as little disruption as possible. When nothing feels urgent, it is because nothing is asking for your attention. This can be unsettling, especially if you are used to tracking progress through effort. When you do not feel change, when you do not sense movement, it is natural to wonder whether anything is working. But this belief does not match how the brain operates. The most effective systems are the quietest ones. And when all is well, they leave no trace on the surface. This is how the brain conserves energy. Sensory systems adapt quickly to steady input. When something remains constant, the neurons involved in perceiving it reduce their activity. The system no longer needs to highlight that input. It fades from view, even as it continues. This is called neural adaptation. It happens with sound, light, touch, and even thought. The subconscious classifies what is familiar, then moves it into the background. It monitors for change, but does not interrupt if none is found. The result is a smooth continuity that feels like nothing at all. And that is the goal. Stillness is not the absence of processing. It is the successful outcome of processing. It means the environment is stable. The body is balanced. The internal signals are within range. There is no need for correction, so no signal rises to the surface. This is why the mind can feel blank at times, why thoughts slow or disappear. The system is not failing. It is simply not being prompted. It is working correctly, holding space instead of filling it. In these moments, people often ask questions. Should I be doing something? Should I be feeling more? But the questions come from a misunderstanding. They imagine the mind as a device that must be activated in order to function. But the truth is that the mind is always functioning. Awareness is only a tiny fraction of its work. The conscious mind is not the control panel. It is the display. It shows what has already been selected, what has already been prepared. Everything else is happening quietly underneath it. If nothing has risen, it means the system has not detected anything that needs to rise. You are not meant to supervise this process. In fact, trying to monitor it closely can make it harder to trust. There is a kind of peace that only arrives when you no longer feel the need to ask how it is working. When people say they feel blank or empty, they are often experiencing a brain that is finally quiet. That quiet can feel unfamiliar, especially if the days have been filled with noise or urgency. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It just means unpracticed. And quiet is a practice worth returning to. Think of a lake that has gone still after a long wind. The surface appears motionless, but underneath, the currents continue. Life moves. The ecosystem adjusts. There is nothing missing, only less resistance. The same is true inside you. If the surface of your experience has gone smooth, if your thoughts are less frequent, if your awareness has settled, that does not mean the system is off. It means it has reached a resting state. Not empty, just not disturbed. The subconscious is still operating, filtering, assessing, stabilizing. It does not need your attention to do this, and it does not need to produce signals to prove it is working. This kind of quiet can take time to accept, especially if you are used to productivity or performance. But once accepted, it becomes its own form of reassurance, a reminder that the body and mind are still working, still processing, still alive, just not asking for anything right now. You are not broken in your stillness. You are being carried by systems that do not require sound. There is no rush, no update, no signpost. There is only this moment, and the trust that comes from not needing to feel every part of it to know that it is real. Nothing is wrong, and everything is happening. There is a deep cultural habit that ties effort to value, that if something feels easy, it must not be meaningful, that only what takes struggle or strain is worthy of attention. But nature does not share this view, and neither does the subconscious. Ease is not laziness. It is the result of refinement, of systems that have been trained by repetition and shaped by experience. The subconscious moves toward effortlessness, not because it is giving up, but because it has already done the work. When something feels automatic, it usually means the brain has learned how to handle it efficiently. It is no longer routing the task through conscious attention. It has recognized the pattern, stored the steps, and begun to manage the process in the background. This is not a failure of awareness. It is a success of integration. Many people interpret this silence as a problem. They say, "I don't feel like I'm trying," or "I don't feel like anything is happening." But what they are actually describing is fluency, a state where the brain no longer needs to involve the higher systems for every step. The process has moved downstream into faster, quieter channels. This is why you do not have to relearn how to walk each day. Why you can enter a familiar space and move through it without planning each step. Why a phrase or skill you once practiced now flows without thought. These are signs of efficiency. They are not indicators that something has been lost. They are signs that the process is now internal. The same is true for emotional regulation. When a difficult feeling arises and passes quietly, without spiraling into thought or action, it is not a sign that you are avoiding it. It is often a sign that your system has learned how to hold it, to process it gently without disruption, to allow the wave to move through and recede. This is how the brain conserves energy. It invests more attention at the beginning, when a pattern is new. Then, over time, it shifts the work to background networks. The path becomes smoother. The signals grow quieter. The sense of effort begins to fade. And that fading is not a problem. It is the reward for consistency. Effortlessness is a natural outcome. It is not something to fear. It means the brain has found a way to operate with less friction, to move through the same landscape without resistance, to support the body and mind without drawing attention. This does not mean that nothing changes. The subconscious continues to adjust, to refine, to maintain balance. But it does so with less waste. Fewer disruptions, more precision. And because the system is quiet, it can often feel as though nothing is occurring. This is especially true during rest. When you allow yourself to step back, the brain begins to shift into maintenance. It does not need conscious involvement to begin this process. It starts because the conditions are right, because you are not pulling energy toward action, because the system senses that it is safe to begin repair. The brain does not require supervision. It is designed to function even in your absence. This is why so many improvements happen when you are not trying. Why insight arrives when you are not searching. Why healing begins when you stop pushing. The system does not need constant direction. It often needs the opposite. Space, permission, stillness. You may not feel these moments as they happen, but you will notice their after effects. A problem that feels smaller, a mood that lifts, a shift in thought that arrives with no clear origin. These are signs that the subconscious has done something quietly, without demanding credit, without requiring you to name it. There is no need to interrupt these processes, no need to help them along. They are already working, and they work best when left uninterrupted. Trust does not always feel active. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all, like the absence of worry, like the silence that follows a deep breath, like knowing that something is being handled, even if you cannot see the work being done. You are not missing anything. The ease you feel is not a gap in the system. It is the system functioning as intended. Effortlessness is not a lack of care. It is the result of care that has already been taken. You are not behind. You are being carried, quietly, correctly, without having to try. When the world grows quiet and the body begins to settle, something unexpected happens inside the brain. The conscious mind begins to fade, but the subconscious does not. It becomes more active in certain ways. It shifts into a different rhythm, a different pace. And that shift is not a disappearance. It is a return to one of the brain's most powerful modes. Sleep is not the absence of function. It is a time of repair, a time of rebalancing, a time when the deeper systems take the lead and begin to do work that cannot be done while you are awake. This is not work that needs your input. In fact, it requires your absence. The conscious mind must soften so that the subconscious can move without interference. During sleep, the brain is not drifting. It is attending to its own rhythms, its own layers. It is regulating hormones, recalibrating mood, repairing tissue, and organizing experience. The process begins slowly. As you begin to fall asleep, the body temperature drops slightly. Heart rate slows. Muscle tone decreases. These are signs that the parasympathetic nervous system is taking over. This part of the nervous system is responsible for rest, digestion, and recovery. It supports healing, and it works best when there is no urgency. Once sleep deepens, the brain enters stages of non-REM rest. These early stages are marked by slow, steady waves of activity. During this time, the brain begins to sift through information collected during the day. It separates what is important from what is not. It strengthens the pathways that represent learning. It weakens those that are no longer needed. This is called synaptic pruning. The brain is not just adding, it is refining. And that refinement is quiet. You do not feel it. You do not guide it. But when you wake, the result is often a sense of clarity, as if something was resolved while you were away. Later in the night, the brain shifts again. It moves into REM sleep. This is when dreams often occur, but dreams are not the only thing happening. During REM, the brain activates in ways that support emotional regulation. Difficult memories are processed. Emotional tone is adjusted. Stress hormones are brought back into balance. This is why sleep often softens strong feelings. Why grief can feel lighter in the morning. Why something that felt overwhelming yesterday becomes manageable today. The brain has been working with those feelings while you rested, not by removing them, but by reshaping how they are held. The immune system also becomes more active during sleep. Cells that repair damage move through the body more efficiently. Inflammation is reduced. Growth hormone is released. These changes do not need to be commanded. The body senses rest and begins its maintenance. Sleep is a signal. It tells the brain and body that it is safe to begin repair, that nothing urgent is being demanded, that resources can be redirected inward, and the subconscious listens. This is why forcing sleep rarely works. The more you try, the more the body senses tension. Sleep does not come from effort. It comes from allowing, from stepping back, from letting the systems that already know what to do take over. Even when sleep feels incomplete, these processes still happen. The brain is adaptive. It uses what time it is given. Even short periods of rest can bring clarity, release, and renewal. You do not need perfect sleep. You need space for the system to do what it was designed to do. Sleep is not optional. It is not indulgent. It is not something to push aside. It is a primary mode of healing. And healing is not a dramatic event. It is a process that continues in silence, night after night. The most important part of this process is your willingness to let go, to step away from control, to stop asking for proof that it is working, because it is, and it always has been. The healing power of sleep does not come from something you activate. It comes from something you trust. The system is already in place, and it is already responding to your stillness. You are not the one doing the work. You are the one being cared for by the work. Right now, even in this moment, the body is preparing. Hormones are shifting. Signals are quieting. The subconscious is listening. And soon, if not already, it will begin again. All you need to do is rest and let it begin. The sleeping brain does more than rest. It reorganizes. It rebuilds. It sifts through memory and feeling, not in a dramatic or chaotic way, but with quiet consistency. The hours spent in stillness are not hours of pause. They are hours of deep activity. The subconscious takes the lead and begins shaping the experiences of the day into something useful, something that can be carried forward without weight. Memory is one of the primary systems shaped during sleep. Each day, the brain receives more information than can be kept. sensory input, thoughts, conversations, routines, emotions. All of it arrives quickly, layered across time and attention. While awake, the brain makes temporary decisions about what to keep near the surface. But it is only during rest that long-term storage begins. As you fall asleep, the hippocampus begins to replay patterns of activity from the day. This is not something you feel. It is a slow, silent rehearsal. The same networks that lit up when learning something new now activate again, this time without distraction. The cortex listens, and if the memory is considered meaningful or repeated, it is strengthened. Connections are reinforced. What was fleeting becomes stable. This is why a good night's sleep often improves recall. It is not just about energy, it is about consolidation. The brain has taken something soft and made it more permanent. The memory has become part of the system, not just a trace passing through. Sleep does not store everything. It is selective. The brain decides what to keep and what to release. Sometimes that decision is based on repetition, other times on emotional weight. This is where emotional memory begins to shift. Events that were charged or confusing may be revisited in sleep, not consciously, not through narrative, but through reprocessing. The emotional tone can be adjusted. The memory remains, but its sharpness may soften. This is why sleep often eases distress. You do not have to relive something for your brain to reduce its intensity. The subconscious handles the weight in the background. You wake up and something feels lighter. The experience is the same, but it no longer presses in the same way. Even dreaming has a place in this process. Though dreams are often strange or fragmented, they are part of the brain's way of weaving memory and emotion into something coherent. During REM sleep, the brain activates emotional centers and visual networks. It connects events, simulates possibilities, and searches for patterns. You may not remember the dream. That is not the point. The point is that the brain has been working quietly to integrate what has not yet been understood. These processes do not need your permission. They do not need supervision. They continue whether you are aware of them or not. In fact, they work best when awareness is reduced, when the surface mind stops checking, when the body settles, when the breath slows. Even short periods of rest can begin this process. A nap, a moment of quiet, a break from stimulation. These intervals allow the brain to begin its behind-the-scenes work. It is not idle. It is making adjustments, noticing what is not yet resolved, beginning the quiet sorting that eventually becomes clarity. This is why answers often come after a pause, why confusion fades overnight, why something painful becomes easier to carry after sleep. The brain has been tending to those experiences, quietly rebalancing them, making space, making sense. There is no need to direct this work. It is already occurring. The brain does not need to be asked to begin. It begins as soon as the conditions allow, as soon as attention steps aside. You do not need to try to remember. You do not need to try to heal. The brain is already doing both. Right now, this process is preparing again. As you rest, the patterns of today are being gently reviewed, not with judgment, not with pressure, with care, with patience, with systems that know exactly what to do. Some memories will be kept. Others will be released. Some feelings will soften. Others will return with less weight. This is not erasure. It is integration. And you do not need to feel it to believe it. You only need to let the quiet continue. The brain is already at work. And soon, everything that can be carried forward will be waiting for you on the other side of sleep. There are parts of the brain that become quieter when you focus. They pause when you're working on a task, making a decision, or following a set of instructions. But when the task is complete and the attention begins to soften, those same areas return. Not loudly, not urgently, just steadily, as if they had been waiting for stillness to resume. This network is known as the default mode. It is a collection of regions that activate when you are at rest, when you are not focused on the outside world. It includes parts of the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the inferior parietal lobes, and others. But you do not need to remember those names. What matters is what they do. The default mode network, or DMN, supports internal experience. It helps you reflect on the past. It helps you imagine the future. It brings together memory, thought, emotion, and story. And it becomes most active when you are not trying to use it. This is the state that gives rise to daydreams, to quiet remembering, to sudden insight that appears when your mind is wandering. It is not distraction. It is not wasted time. It is one of the brain's most natural rhythms. When you are walking without purpose, when you are lying still with your eyes closed, when you are staring out a window with no task in mind, this network begins to stir. It is not pushing forward. It is drifting, making connections that were not obvious, linking experiences that happened hours or even years apart. This is where creativity begins. Not in effort, but in space. Not in pressure, but in openness. The brain is constantly collecting fragments, pieces of conversation, half-formed ideas, emotions that do not yet have language. While you are focused, those pieces remain separate. But in rest, the subconscious begins to weave them together. This is why a solution sometimes appears without warning, why an idea feels sudden, even though it has been building quietly for days. The DMN has been working while you were not looking. It has been searching for patterns while your attention was elsewhere. It does not require focus. In fact, focus can sometimes quiet it. The DMN is not concerned with doing. It is concerned with meaning. It turns inward. It examines the shape of thought, the curve of memory, the edges of identity. It connects the self you were with the self you are now. And it does this without you needing to participate. This is also part of how the brain maintains a continuous sense of self. By keeping track of who you have been, what you have felt, what you have chosen. It does not present these details to you all at once. It simply keeps the thread intact, so that when you wake up tomorrow, you feel like the same person. Even if something has changed. The DMN is active during dreaming too, especially in REM sleep. It continues to organize experience into a story, even if that story is strange or non-linear. The goal is not coherence. It is connection. And those connections support not just memory and creativity, but identity. When you wonder who you are, the answer is not stored in one place. It is distributed across memories, beliefs, relationships, and preferences. The DMN links them. It keeps them near each other, so that you feel like a whole person instead of a collection of fragments. Even now, as you listen, this network may be active. If your attention has begun to wander, if thoughts have drifted, if you have lost the thread and found it again, that is part of the rhythm. That is part of how the brain returns to itself when it is no longer being directed. There is no need to try to activate this state. It arrives naturally. When effort fades, when the task is done, when the outside world grows quiet and the mind is free to return to its own space. You do not need to chase creativity. You do not need to solve every problem. The brain is already looking, already sorting, already connecting things in the background. You can let it continue. You are not falling behind when you drift. You are falling into place, and everything meaningful is being gathered where it belongs. Rest is often seen as something passive, a break between moments of doing, a pause in the rhythm of effort. But inside the brain and throughout the body, rest is never empty. It is a period of recalibration, a quiet kind of restoration that supports everything that comes after it. The subconscious understands this. In fact, it depends on it. When you stop moving, when the noise fades, when no new task is being asked of you, the systems within you begin to shift. Not down, but inward. Not off, but into a different mode. A mode that supports recovery and realignment. The brain was not designed for constant output. It was designed to alternate. Focus and release. Action and rest. These are the twin rhythms that keep the nervous system balanced. They allow energy to be used wisely and returned when needed. Even short periods of stillness can begin this process. A few minutes of quiet, a slow breath, a walk with no destination. These moments may feel like nothing, but inside, the brain is making adjustments. Signals soften. Hormonal activity begins to change. Muscles release tension held too long. Circulation improves. The breath slows. The brain interprets this stillness as safety. And once safety is confirmed, the subconscious begins to restore. This is the space where integration begins. Memory is not just something that happens during sleep. Even during waking rest, the brain reviews recent events, looking for structure and meaning. It identifies what has not been fully processed and begins to work with it. Gently, quietly, without demanding your attention. The same is true for emotion. Feelings that were stored during busier moments can return in small waves. Not to overwhelm you, but to be acknowledged, to be recognized. The subconscious knows that emotion cannot be sorted in urgency. It needs time and stillness. And when it receives them, it begins to shift what you carry into something more manageable. These adjustments do not happen all at once. They are not dramatic. They unfold slowly, layer by layer, and often they occur without you noticing. You simply feel a little more clear, a little less tense, a little more like yourself again. This is the gift of downtime. It is not just a break, it is active care. Even when you do nothing, your brain is deeply engaged in maintaining you. Rest is not a gap in progress. It is part of progress, a stage of invisible maintenance that the subconscious enters whenever conditions allow. The breath itself becomes part of this rhythm. As it slows, carbon dioxide levels adjust. Blood pH stabilizes. Neural activity shifts from high-frequency alert states into slower, more restorative patterns. These are not things you make happen. They happen as the body receives the signal that no more is being asked of it. The nervous system is always listening. And when it hears quiet, it begins to return to center. This return is not something to chase. It cannot be forced. The more you push, the longer it delays. But when you allow it to arrive on its own, it often comes sooner than expected. There is no perfect way to rest, no method you must master. All that is required is space and a willingness to let the subconscious do its work. This is what happens in moments of pause. The brain begins to sweep the floor, put things back in order, untangle knots that have gone unnoticed. It clears the surface so that when attention returns, there is more room to move. And it does all of this without needing your involvement. You do not need to meditate. You do not need to monitor your thoughts. You do not need to get rest exactly right. The system is flexible. It responds to any genuine moment of stillness. Even a few seconds of quiet awareness can signal that reset is possible. The subconscious receives that message and begins. And the more often it receives that message, the more quickly it responds the next time. Rest becomes easier to enter. The reset becomes more familiar, and your system becomes more trusting of the rhythm. This is not indulgence. It is not delay. It is care. The kind of care that happens without sound or instruction. You are not wasting time when you rest. You are giving your brain exactly what it needs to continue. Quietly, naturally, already underway. There is a quiet force within you that never stops working. It does not ask questions. It does not need instruction. It monitors. It adjusts. And it keeps you balanced without asking you to participate. This is the system of homeostasis. The brain's ability to keep the body within safe, steady ranges, even as the world around you shifts. You do not feel most of these adjustments, and you are not meant to. They happen in the background, managed by the subconscious with care and precision. Your heart beats faster or slower depending on need. Your temperature rises and falls in response to the environment. Your blood pressure, hormone levels, electrolyte balance, and immune responses are all regulated moment by moment, without any need for thought. The goal is not perfection. It is stability. The body has many variables to manage. The amount of oxygen in the blood, the amount of sugar available for energy, the acidity of fluids, the rate of cell repair. Each of these factors must stay within a certain range for you to feel well, and the brain tracks them all without needing to alert you unless something drifts too far. Most of the time, these signals never rise into awareness. If your temperature drops slightly, you begin to shiver. If it rises, you sweat. You may notice these actions, but you did not start them. The subconscious initiated them before you even realized what was happening. This same care extends to the rhythms that guide your sleep and waking. Hormones like melatonin and cortisol are released on a schedule maintained by your internal clock. This clock is located in the hypothalamus, a part of the brain deeply connected to homeostasis. It listens for signals from light, temperature, and movement, then adjusts your energy levels accordingly. You do not choose this cycle. You follow it. Even hunger and thirst are homeostatic signals. They are not simply responses to emptiness. They are part of a larger conversation between your organs and your brain. When nutrients are low, the body communicates that need upward. The brain listens and responds. You feel the result as appetite, but the actual coordination is much deeper and much quieter. Every organ is in dialogue with the brain. The liver, kidneys, lungs, skin, and stomach send information through the bloodstream and the nervous system. This information is reviewed constantly, and when something needs to change, the brain makes that change in the background. This is a system of deep trust. You do not have to remember to breathe more during exercise. You do not have to measure your blood pressure before standing up. You do not have to calculate how much sodium your body has lost through sweat. The subconscious already knows, and it adjusts before you can even form a question. This is part of why calm can be so powerful. When the body senses safety, the system has more freedom to return to baseline. Stress hormones decrease. Inflammation quiets. Digestion improves. The immune system resumes its maintenance work. Everything begins to shift back into balance, not because you did something, but because you stopped needing to do anything. The brain prioritizes this balance over nearly everything else. It will slow you down when you push too hard. It will make you feel thirsty before you are dehydrated. It will pull you toward rest when recovery is needed. These messages are not interruptions. They are reminders that the system is always seeking your stability. And the quieter you become, the more clearly the system is able to hear itself. This is why stillness often brings clarity, why pausing can reduce discomfort, why breathing deeply softens tension. These actions do not change the world outside. They help the body return to itself. They allow the subconscious to restore its preferred rhythm. You may not notice each correction. Most happen below the surface, but you can trust they are taking place. Right now, the subconscious is scanning, adjusting, sensing what needs more and what needs less, bringing you back into the space where everything can continue smoothly. There is no button to press, no setting to manage. The design is already in place, and that design is working in your favor. You are not holding your body together. You are being held by systems that were made for this purpose. They are not waiting for permission. They are already doing their work. And they will continue, even as you sleep, even as you drift, even as the surface of the mind grows quiet once again. There is comfort in repetition, in the feeling of something known, a familiar sound, a daily ritual, a space that feels unchanged. These are not just habits, they are anchors, and the subconscious relies on them more than you might realize. The brain is not only concerned with physical balance, it also works continuously to support emotional stability. This is not done through loud signals or dramatic shifts. It happens gently, through quiet adjustments and predictable rhythms. And much of it happens beneath awareness. At the heart of this emotional steadiness is familiarity. The subconscious is drawn to what it recognizes, not because it cannot learn new things, but because the known provides fewer surprises. And fewer surprises create space for calm. Each day, your brain moves through countless interactions, thoughts, and sensations. And without your instruction, it begins to organize them. It marks what is safe, what is neutral, what can be returned to. Over time, the brain begins to prefer these familiar elements. They require less energy, less attention, less emotional activation. This is why a routine can feel grounding, why doing something in the same order, at the same time, in the same space, can bring ease. The subconscious recognizes the pattern. It confirms there is nothing to fear, nothing unknown to solve. And so, it allows you to rest in the moment rather than prepare for the next. Familiarity does not mean boredom. It means your brain has learned the environment well enough to stop scanning it constantly. That freedom opens space for quiet reflection, for peace, for presence. These emotional rhythms are supported by subconscious systems that regulate neurotransmitters and hormones. Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and others all play a role in mood and connection. Their levels fluctuate naturally across the day, responding to light, to movement, to social interaction, and to internal patterns. The subconscious manages these fluctuations without needing your direction. It adjusts based on what it observes. If your environment is chaotic or uncertain, the system prepares for challenge. If your surroundings are stable and predictable, the system reduces alertness and allows calm to return. This is part of why small rituals feel soothing. A warm drink in the evening, a favorite blanket, a few minutes spent with a familiar scent or sound. These cues signal to the subconscious that the moment is safe, that nothing new is being asked, that it is all right to let go of watchfulness and move toward rest. Even small consistencies have impact. The same seat at the table, the same way of greeting someone you love, the same words you return to when you are unsure. These are not trivial. They are signals to the emotional system, markers of continuity that tell the subconscious you are still within the known. When emotions fluctuate, the subconscious often reaches for these anchors. It looks for patterns to hold, for repetition to rely on. And when it finds them, the system begins to stabilize. The feeling may not disappear, but it may soften. It may lose its urgency. It becomes part of the rhythm rather than a disruption to it. This process also supports identity. By returning to the same thoughts, values, and memories, the subconscious helps you feel like the same person from one day to the next. It does not preserve every detail, but it preserves the structure, the shape of how you see yourself, the rhythm of what feels true. Even when the world outside changes, these inner patterns provide a place to return to, and the brain is constantly reinforcing them in the background. Not because change is bad, but because a foundation must remain steady if you are going to carry anything new. Emotional consistency is not emotional sameness. It is the feeling of being held by something that does not shift as quickly as the rest of the world. And that steadiness is maintained by systems you do not control. Systems that rely on familiarity, on softness, on rhythm. When something new arrives, the subconscious does not resist it. It begins to map it, to integrate it, to compare it to what is already known. Over time, the new becomes familiar, and another layer of emotional grounding is added. This is why you adapt, why change becomes manageable. The brain is always working to connect what is unknown to what is already held. And in doing so, it reduces fear. It reduces urgency. It makes space for stillness again. You are not drifting. You are being stabilized by patterns the brain remembers for you. And those patterns are enough. They are what allow the emotional system to rest, even in motion, even in uncertainty. The quiet continues, and your emotional self continues with it, safely rooted in what it already knows. There is something steady within you, something that does not shift with each passing thought or every fleeting feeling. Even when the outer world is unfamiliar, even when the day brings something new, you still feel like yourself. This is not a coincidence. It is the quiet work of the subconscious, maintaining the thread of identity that weaves through your experience. A thread that holds memory, personality, preference, and belief. One that helps you wake each morning with a sense of continuity, even after the blankness of sleep. The feeling of self is not held in a single location. It is built across time, across moments, relationships, habits, and decisions. It is not something you think about every day, yet it remains with you. It returns when you are quiet. It shows up when something feels right. It anchors you when the outside world becomes unpredictable. The subconscious is responsible for much of this anchoring. It tracks who you have been across situations. It notices the consistency in how you speak, how you respond, how you move through the world. And it uses those patterns to create a sense of predictability. Not in a rigid way, but in a way that lets you recognize yourself in the middle of change. Every memory that matters to you, every experience that shaped you, is quietly stored and connected to the next. Not all memories are conscious, but they are there, layered and linked. The subconscious uses this network to reinforce a simple message. You are still you. Even as you grow, even as you shift, even as you forget. This continuity is built through small repetitions. The way you respond to familiar people, the stories you return to in conversation, the values you express without needing to define them, the objects you keep near you, the preferences you rarely explain, the thoughts that circle back again and again. None of this needs to be performed. It is simply expressed. The subconscious manages it, matching each new experience to the structure it already holds. If something aligns, it is added to your sense of self. If it does not, it is either questioned or set aside. This is part of why some experiences feel uncomfortable. They do not fit into the model. The subconscious is trying to understand where they belong. And over time, even these unfamiliar pieces can be integrated. They are compared to the rest of what you have lived. Slowly, they find a place. Or slowly, they are released. The brain does not rush this process. It is patient. It listens over time. It pays attention to consistency. If something new becomes repeated, it begins to be accepted. And in this way, identity is not fixed. It is flexible but steady, soft but resilient. This continuity also helps guide decisions. When you face something uncertain, the subconscious searches for similar moments. It looks back through memory, through patterns, through emotional tone, and it brings forward what feels aligned. You may not know why something feels right, but the subconscious does. It has already done the comparison. It has already checked the pattern. This is not intuition in a mystical sense. It is pattern recognition across years of living. It is memory and experience distilled into a quiet signal. And that signal keeps you feeling like yourself. It is also why change can feel overwhelming at first. Not because it is bad, but because the system has not yet found a way to connect it to what already exists. Once that connection is made, the newness softens. The experience becomes part of the story. The subconscious is always trying to make sense of the timeline, to ensure that who you are today makes sense next to who you were yesterday. It does not need to make everything match. It just needs enough familiarity to continue the thread. Even now, that thread is being held. As your awareness slows, as the surface of the mind quiets, the deeper layers are still at work. They are keeping the story intact, holding what matters, letting what is extra begin to fade. You are not a collection of moments. You are a continuity, something the brain has been protecting and organizing for you since the beginning. You do not need to hold all the details. The subconscious has kept what is meaningful, and tomorrow, when you open your eyes, that thread will still be there. You will still feel like you, and the work of holding that truth will still be happening quietly behind the scenes. There is a point, somewhere between waking and sleep, where thought begins to fade. Not because it has stopped, but because it is no longer needed. The systems that remain are the ones that do not ask for attention. They are the ones that carry you without being seen. This is where the subconscious continues, not as a mystery, not as something to be unlocked, but as a familiar presence, always there, always working. Throughout this entire journey, you have been exploring what the brain already knows how to do, how it filters, how it balances, how it adjusts, predicts, and protects. None of this required your intervention. None of it needed effort. It all happened quietly, because that is how the system was built. The brain's hidden work is not a backup system. It is the primary one. It monitors your body. It supports your mood. It preserves your memories and your identity. It links thought to feeling, moment to moment, without needing to pass everything through awareness. This quiet work does not stop when you close your eyes. In many ways, it becomes more active. As the surface layers of the mind settle, the deeper layers step forward. They sort, they soften, they restore. Without noise, without narrative. Even now, as you listen, these systems are still active. They are adjusting breath, releasing tension, slowing the pace of thought, preparing the body and mind for rest. This is not something you must initiate. It is already happening. You do not need to measure this progress. You do not need to ask whether it is working. The very absence of alertness is the signal that it is. The quieter things become, the more clearly you can feel that nothing is being asked of you. And when nothing is being asked, the body understands that it can begin to restore. The subconscious does not work for applause. It does not need confirmation. It is steady in its purpose. Its loyalty is not dependent on your awareness. Whether you feel it or not, whether you notice it or not, it continues. It is present through every moment of your life, through joy, through confusion, through rest and recovery, through growth and quiet. It does not stop when you pause. It supports the pause. This is why you do not have to hold everything together. The holding is already being done. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to feel nothing and know that something is still working. You're allowed to rest without reason. No part of this process requires supervision. The systems were in place long before you understood what they were doing, and they will continue long after you stop thinking about them. This is the heart of trust. Knowing that the systems that matter most are the ones that do not need to be managed. That the breath will return on its own. That the body will shift to find comfort. That the brain will adjust the tone of feeling and memory, even when you forget what you were feeling to begin with. You are not required to be productive. Not in this moment, not in the next. The deep work is not in what you do. It is in what is done for you. Let that be enough. Let the absence of urgency become its own form of reassurance. There is no need to name what is happening. No need to hold the steps in sequence. The brain is already keeping time, already marking what matters, already knowing when to bring something forward and when to let it fade. You can fall asleep without finishing the thought. You can rest without closing every loop. The loops will close themselves. The systems will complete what they began. You are not falling behind. You are being brought forward by something that does not need to explain itself. And if nothing more happens tonight, if this is the moment where the listening ends and sleep begins, know that your brain will keep going. Silently, carefully, correctly, even now, even here. Even as you drift, the subconscious work continues.